Okay, 1 Kings 18. This is one of the biggies. After a long time, in the third year, so it's been raining for 3.5 years. The Lord said, it's in the third year. We'll find out later that it was 3.5 years. In the third year, the word of the Lord came to Elijah. Could end this drought any time, by the way. According to what he said back at the beginning of chapter 17, when we first met him, it's at his word the rain will start again. He does not have to wait for God's permission to declare the skies open for business. God has granted him the authority to make the decision for himself. Apparently, that's what it seems like. Apparently. And he's not doing it. 3.5 years into it, he's not doing it. He's not getting the response that he wants. The people of Israel are not turning back to Jehovah like they're supposed to. So Elijah is going to be sitting on his hands and not giving the rain up again. Apparently, again, he had the authority to do so, and he is choosing not to do that. And God is ready to move things along. God is now ready to get things moving here. So the word of the Lord came to Elijah. Go, present yourself to Ahab, and I will send rain on the land. So God's going to take matters into his own hands here. Elijah apparently had the authority to do this himself, but he wasn't going to do it, so now God is going to start moving things. So Elijah went to present himself to Ahab. Now the famine was severe in Samaria, and probably also in Sidon, where Elijah had been, where Jezebel was from, and where it seems like the woman and her son had no food because of the rain. So it wasn't just Samaria, it was also the lands around Samaria that were afflicted by it as well. Not in Judah, apparently. Judah apparently doesn't have this problem, but Samaria does. And Ahab had summoned Obadiah, who was in charge of his palace. Obadiah was a devout believer in the Lord. While Jezebel was killing off the Lord's prophets, Obadiah had taken 100 prophets and hidden them in 2 caves, 50 in each, and had supplied them with food and water. So there were some good people still around, even some right there in Ahab's own administration. Just because this guy was in charge of the palace and was working for Ahab doesn't mean that he himself was bad. He was good and was trying to use his position to do good things and help good people. I don't know if this is the same Obadiah who has a book of the Bible written by. There is a book in the Bible with the name Obadiah on it, and we don't know anything about that Obadiah except that his name was Obadiah, basically. There's a bunch of other, here's an Obadiah, there are going to be Obadiahs coming up, it's like, who knows if that Obadiah was any of these Obadiahs or some other guy. Apparently it was a very common name. We're not yet at the point where we're getting to the prophets who start writing things down yet. We're going to be there soon. We got to get through Elijah first. Elijah's going to be kind of the figure around whom the office of the prophet transitions. And we're going to then start seeing more of these writing prophets show up. But as of now, not yet. So I don't think this is him. I don't think this is that guy. At any rate, it's a guy called Obadiah, a good guy called Obadiah. And he has this prophet school thing. There are 100 prophets. Okay. This is a little tricky. A prophet, as I said before, is someone who speaks for God. And you didn't study or train to be a prophet. God came to you and designated you as a prophet. All the men who became prophets, or prophetesses, because there were prophetesses too, women who became prophets, anybody who became a prophet, a genuine prophet of God, and spoke the word of God to people, you didn't seek that position. God came to you and assigned you that mission. Some of them didn't even want to do it. Okay, that was an irresistible call that you did not set out for yourself to do. You did not decide, hey, I want to go to be a prophet. Like that. No one did that. I mean, if you did, you were a false prophet. None of the genuine prophets of God did that. So these prophet schools aren't like training someone to be a prophet, okay? I'm thinking they're basically schools of people who study under prophets who teach certain things, and then they would in turn go off and teach other people. Sort of like the idea of the Levites. They were supposed to travel the country and teach people about the word, the law, the Torah, the law of Moses. I'm thinking of these prophet schools that existed at this time were people who studied under the prophets, the word the prophets spoke, and then kind of like almost like a monk, like a monastery, like an enclave of monks living in a monastery or something like that. That's what I think. It's what it seems like to me. It's like you have a group of people who study under certain prophets or study the words of certain prophets to edify themselves and then to teach that to others as they travel around. But I don't really know. At any rate, these were not men who were prophets in the sense that they were given visions and dreams and messages straight from God to speak to people. Because you didn't enter a school to become a prophet like that. The Spirit of God would come upon you and designate you to be a prophet. And when that happened, you had no choice but to be a prophet. And you didn't. Nobody trained themselves for that role. That's not how that worked. Anyway, so here's a guy who's in charge of 100 prophets who have been hiding because Jezebel's been killing them all off. And there's 100 that have escaped her wrath, and that this guy is in charge of taking care of. And of course, if she finds out he's doing that, I'm sure she's going to kill him too. So this is a dangerous mission, and he's right there in the house. He's Ahab's right-hand man. So Ahab had said to Obadiah, "Go through the land to all the springs and valleys. Maybe we can find some grass to keep the horses and mules alive, so we will not have to kill any of our animals." So they divided the land they were to cover, Ahab going in one direction and Obadiah in another. Apparently these men were doing this themselves. Apparently this is the king of Israel and his right-hand man. Apparently they were doing this themselves. Maybe even on their own. I don't know. That's how desperate they are to find grass to feed their horses. They need the horses and mules alive because that's their chariot army. Okay, Ahab wants to keep his chariot army intact, so he's going to sacrifice other animals and livestock to provide food for the horses and mules that are in his chariot army. As Obadiah was walking along, Elijah met him. So again, he's just like walking along the road. Apparently Ahab is too in the other direction. As Obadiah was walking along, Elijah met him. Obadiah recognized him, bowed down to the ground, and said, "Is it really you, my lord Elijah?" "Yes," he replied. "Go tell your master, Elijah is here." Elijah has come out of hiding. He has revealed his face to the people. He is ready for a showdown. "What have I done wrong?" asked Obadiah, "that you are handing your servant over to Ahab to be put to death? As surely as the Lord your God lives." Now, the Lord is Obadiah's God too. He's not saying this in the sense that he's your God, not mine, like the widow previously had done when she first met Elijah. He's just being disrespectful. Your servant, the Lord your God. He's speaking respectfully to Elijah here. "As surely as the Lord your God lives, there is not a nation or kingdom where my master has not sent someone to look for you." So Ahab's on the hunt for Elijah now. He wants Elijah. He needs to get Elijah to open up the sky so it rains. "And whenever a nation or kingdom claimed you were not there, he made them swear they could not find you. But now you tell me to go to my master and say Elijah is here. I don't know where the Spirit of the Lord may carry you when I leave you. If I go and tell Ahab and he doesn't find you, he will kill me. Yet I, your servant, have worshipped the Lord since my youth. Haven't you heard, my Lord, what I did while Jezebel was killing the prophets of the Lord? I hid 100 of the Lord's prophets in 2 caves, 50 in each, and supplied them with food and water. And now you tell me to go to my master and say, Elijah is here. He will kill me." Elijah said, because Obadiah is convinced that Elijah is going to be gone by the time Ahab gets here. He doesn't even consider it a possibility that Elijah would still be here. Elijah said, "As the Lord Almighty lives, whom I serve, I will surely present myself to Ahab today." So Elijah is not going anywhere. He's going to stay right here. So Obadiah went to meet Ahab and told him, and Ahab went to meet Elijah. When he saw Elijah, he said to him, "Is that you, you troubler of Israel?" Elijah is the cause of all the trouble as far as Ahab is concerned. "I have not made trouble for Israel," Elijah replied, "but you and your father's family have." That's Omri again. Omri was one who started this current regime. Ahab is a member of the house of Omri, so everything Ahab is doing is a legacy or a result of Omri's policies. You and your father's family have. You have abandoned the Lord's commands and have followed the Baals. Now summon the people from all over Israel to meet me on Mount Carmel, and bring the 450 prophets of Baal and the 400 prophets of Asherah to eat at Jezebel's table. These are Jezebel's people. She's the one who brought these people to the country. I mean, they probably are Israelites. Some of them are. Some of them may be imports, like Jezebel herself is, from Phoenicia or Sidon. But a lot of them probably are legitimate Hebrews who have converted to Baal worship. So Ahab sent word throughout all Israel and assembled the prophets on Mount Carmel. Elijah went before the people and said, "How long will you waver between two options, like stepping in two rivers at the same time? You have your foot in each. 1 foot on Yahweh and 1 foot on Baal. You're going to waver back and forth. If the Lord is God, it's the L-O-R-D, capital Lord, Yahweh, Jehovah, Yehovah, how you pronounce it, is God. Follow him. If Baal is God, follow him." But the people said nothing. They're being called out. They don't like it. They don't have anything to say in response. They're just going to sit there and say nothing. Typical human behavior. Then Elijah said to them, "I am the only one of the Lord's prophets left." Now, he knows that's not true. Obadiah just got done telling him that there's 100 prophets still left. Now, again, these prophets aren't the same category as Elijah the prophet. But he's not the only servant that God still has in Israel. He might be saying this for an exaggerated effect, for hyperbole, but we'll find out later that he seems to genuinely believe this. He seems to genuinely think that he's the only one left in Israel who worships God. So he may be intending this sincerely. I'm not sure. "I am the only one of the Lord's prophets left, but Baal has 450 prophets. Apparently the 400 Asherah prophets didn't come today. Apparently. "Get 2 bulls for us. Let them choose one for themselves, and let them cut it into pieces and put it on the wood, but not set fire to it. I will prepare the other bull and put it on the wood, but not set fire to it. Then you will call on the name of your God, and I will call on the name of the Lord, the God who answers by fire and burns up the sacrifice, obviously. He is God," whether Baal or Jehovah. "Whichever God answers the call and burns up the sacrifice by fire is God." Then all the people said, "What you say is good." So they're agreeing to it so far. They said nothing when he challenged them to make a determination one way or another and stop trying to live 2 lives. Stop trying to please 2 masters. Jesus said you can't serve 2 masters, either God or money. In that case, the context was either a choice between either God or money. In this case, it's either Baal or Jehovah. Which God is which? Which master are you going to serve? They didn't say anything to that. But when this challenge was put to them, they said, okay, we can accept that. Elijah said to the prophets of Baal, "Choose one of the bulls and prepare it first, since there are so many of you. Call on the name of your God, but do not light the fire." So they took the bull given them and prepared it. He's giving them the honor of choosing the bull. He'll take whichever one they don't choose. Then they called on the name of Baal from morning till noon. "O Baal, answer us," they shouted. But there was no response. No one answered. And they danced around the altar they had made. Hopped around, danced around, who knows exactly what they did. At noon, so they've been at this for a few hours. I don't know if morning is sunrise, a little after sunrise they started this, probably a little after sunrise they started this challenge. So 4 or 5 hours now have gone by, maybe. So at noon, Elijah began to taunt them. "Shout louder," he said. "Surely he is a god. Perhaps he is deep in thought, or busy, or traveling. Maybe he is sleeping and must be awakened." In some versions, maybe he's relieving himself. Maybe he's off on the pot somewhere, taking care of business. So they shouted louder and slashed themselves with swords and spears, as was their custom, until their blood flowed. Apparently, this was designed to elicit the sympathy of the gods. If you're hurting yourself, cutting yourself, slashing yourself on the arms and legs or whatever, or feet, or wherever it is you're doing it, apparently the intention here was to get the gods to be sympathetic to you and grant you what you're asking for because you're punishing yourself so much for it. It's a very similar thought process to the idea of child sacrifice, which some of the nations practiced. Ammon and Moab practiced that, and Israel itself would begin practicing that later on. Haven't yet. We haven't heard about that being introduced to Israel or Judah yet, but it will be. And the idea was, apparently, as far as I can tell, that by doing this, by giving up your son or daughter, or in this case, by cutting yourself, we would call it cutting today, is what we would call it today, you were trying to get the gods to look upon you with sympathy and grant you what you're asking for because you're suffering so much for it. It's a form of manipulation of your gods. God himself doesn't let people do this. This is not how you get God to pay attention, the actual God, the real God, the one and only God to pay attention to you. This is how you get other people to pay attention to you, though. I mean, we still have a cutting phenomenon to this day. The idea of gashing yourself for attention is still present in our culture today. That's what we call cutting, the phenomenon of when teenagers in particular will cut themselves as a cry for attention. So that idea of hurting yourself to get someone's attention is still present because it's part of human psyche. And so because when man makes God, he makes him in his own image, they're doing what they think they need to do to get someone else's attention because this God they've made in their minds is pretty much just a figment of their own imagination. So they shouted louder and slashed themselves with swords and spears, as was their custom, until their blood flowed. Midday passed, and they continued their frantic prophesying until the time for the evening sacrifice. This has been going on all day now. But there was no response. No one answered. No one paid attention because there was no one there. Then Elijah said to all the people, "Come here to me." They came to him, and he repaired the altar of the Lord which was in ruins. So at some point in the past, on Mount Carmel, there was an altar of the Lord. Probably before they set up the temple. At that time, all these altars that were scattered throughout the country were supposed to be illegal, only supposed to go to the temple to worship. But there was a remnant of an old altar here, so he's repairing it, he's rebuilding it. Remember, they're in Israel, they don't have access to the temple in Jerusalem. So Elijah is repairing this old broken altar, which was in ruins. Elijah took 12 stones. This goes back to the days of Joshua. Joshua had a lot to do with stones, remember that? One for each of the tribes descended from Jacob, to whom the word of the Lord had come, saying, "Your name shall be Israel." So there's a bit of a reflection or a nostalgic look back on what they should be. They've gotten so far away from what they're supposed to be. Okay, they've gotten way, way, way off track here from what they're supposed to be. So this rebuilding of this broken down altar with 12 stones representing each of the 12 tribes of Israel is supposed to be a reminder to these people of what they're supposed to be and how far away they've come from being that. With the stones, he built an altar in the name of the Lord. And he dug a trench around it large enough to hold 2 seahs of seed. That is probably about 1.3 quarts, or 13 quarts or 15 liters of seed. He arranged the wood, cut the bull into pieces. This is evidence that he probably was a priest, since he's offering a sacrifice here, and he apparently knows how to do that. He's been trained in the offering of sacrifices. It's evidence that he might have. We don't know. We don't have his genealogy. We don't have even his tribe. We don't actually know his background at all. But the fact that he's offering the sacrifice and apparently knows how to do it is an indication that he might have been a priest. But we can't be certain about that. He arranged the wood, cut the bull into pieces, and laid it on the wood. Then he said to them, "Fill 4 large jars with water, and pour it on the offering and on the wood." "Do it again," he said. And they did it again. And I guess they did it the first time. "Do it a 3rd time," he ordered, and they did it a 3rd time. Obviously, they're getting this from some kind of river nearby, I guess. I don't know the topography of Israel well enough to tell you what the closest river water source is. But since it hasn't rained for 3.5 years, there's got to be some river nearby somewhere they can rely on. So do it a third time, he ordered, and they did it the third time. The water ran down around the altar and even filled the trench. This is one wet pile of wood and stone and bowl. He wants to make this as difficult as possible. This is not a sort of dry timber that's going to be set aflame by the slightest spark. Okay, this is going to require quite a bit of effort to get all this soaked stuff on fire, to get it lit aflame. At the time of sacrifice, the prophet Elijah stepped forward and prayed, O Lord, God of Abraham, Isaac, and Israel. So there's again a call back to the past, reminding these people behind him who are listening to him what they're supposed to be. Let it be known today that you are God in Israel, and that I am your servant, and have done all these things at your command. Answer me, O Lord, answer me, so these people will know that you, O Lord, are God, and that you are turning their hearts back again. Then the fire of the Lord fell, that probably is in the form of a bolt of lightning, but who knows, and burned up the sacrifice, the wood, the stones, and the soil, and also licked up the water in the trench. So boom. The test is over. One God has been proven real, and one God has been proven fake. When all the people saw this, they fell prostrate and cried, The Lord, that's capital L-O-R-D, Lord, so Jehovah, that's the proper name of God. He is God. The Lord, He is God. Then Elijah commanded them, Seize the prophets of Baal. Don't let anyone get away. They seized them. Elijah had them brought down to the Kishon Valley and slaughtered there. Let's go back and look at it a little bit. In order to get the justification for this, let's read about the test of the false prophet. Elijah is completely within his rights to do this. Let's go back and read a little bit about the test of the false prophet. This is back in Deuteronomy, near the end of Moses' farewell address to the people. Deuteronomy 18. Let's start in verse 14. Moses is speaking to the people, his farewell address. The nations you will dispossess, listen to those who practice sorcery or divination. But as for you, the Lord your God has not permitted you to do so. The Lord your God will raise up a prophet for you like me from among your own brothers. You must listen to him. Now in the end, he's talking specifically about Jesus. The singular figure he's talking about here someday down the road will be Jesus. But there will be plenty of prophets between Moses and Jesus, of which Elijah is one. So this is one of those prophecies that has multiple fulfillments in time. The final, ultimate, singular fulfillment here is in Jesus, which is in the days, of course, of the New Testament. But along the way, there are going to be other prophets that come along who will also be speaking for God, like Elijah. But there will also be false prophets who will claim to be speaking for God and will not be. So that's what we're going to be reading about here. You must listen to him, for this is what you asked of the Lord your God at Horeb on the day of the assembly, when you said, Let us not hear the voice of the Lord our God, nor see the great fire anymore, or we will die. The Lord said to me, What they say is good. I will raise up for them a prophet like you from among their brothers. I will put my words in his mouth, and he will tell them everything I command him. If anyone does not listen to my words, the prophet speaks in my name, I myself will call him to account. But a prophet who promises to speak in my name anything I have not commanded him to say, or a prophet who speaks in the name of other gods, must be put to death. So there is a justification for putting these prophets of Baal to death. You may say to yourselves, How can we know when a message has not been spoken by the Lord? If what a prophet proclaims in the name of the Lord does not take place or come true, that is a message the Lord has not spoken. That prophet has spoken presumptuously. Do not be afraid of him. These prophets have been proved to have spoken presumptuously. What they said did not come true. Their God did not burn up their sacrifice. Elijah's God did. So Elijah's God was proven to be real, and the prophets of Baal were proven to be false. So they're false prophets, and thus they're not only justified in killing them, they're actually commanded to. It would be wrong for Elijah not to kill them or put them to death because he's been commanded to by God through the law of Moses. And Elijah, so that's happened. So those now again, the prophets of Asherah apparently are smart enough not to show up. Prophets of Baal did show up. They failed their test. They were put to death, justifiably so. And Elijah said to Ahab, "Go, eat and drink, for there is the sound of heavy rain." So Ahab was there too, apparently. Ahab was witness to all of this. Ahab does not have the excuse of ignorance after this. He was there, apparently, throughout this whole day. So Ahab went off to eat and drink, but Elijah climbed to the top of Carmel, bent down to the ground, and put his face between his knees. So he humbles himself low. "Go and look toward the sea," he told his servant. And he went up and looked. I'm assuming Elijah is still sitting with his head tucked between his knees. I don't know who his servant is. These prophets did have servants. We'll read about some of them and even get the names of some of them later on. Apparently Elijah had a buddy who traveled around with him at least part of the time. There's nothing there, so he went and looked. He went up and looked. Nothing there, he said. 7 times Elijah said, "Go back." The 7th time the servant reported, "A cloud as small as a man's hand is rising up from the sea." So the rain is coming from the sea. So Elijah said, "Go and tell Ahab." I'm guessing Ahab is done with his meal at this point, apparently. "Hitch up your chariot and go down before the rain stops you." Because once the rain starts to fall, the ground will get muddy and his chariot's going to get stuck in the mud. Meanwhile, the sky grew black with clouds. So that hand-sized cloud has now become a series of dark clouds covering the sky. The wind rose, and a heavy rain came on, and Ahab rode off to Jezreel. The power of the Lord came upon Elijah, and, tucking his cloak into his belt, he ran ahead of Ahab all the way to Jezreel. Okay. So that is the test of the prophets of God and the prophet of God and the prophet of God, and Jehovah God, the God, and the prophets of Baal. Elijah's God has passed the test, while the prophets of Baal, their God, did not pass the test. And there is now rain on the land again. Now this was a test of faith, and presumably for Ahab, who apparently was there the whole time. He wasn't mentioned during the account of the test itself, but he was seen before and immediately after, so apparently he was there the whole time. And it was meant to be a demonstration of God's power and presence to Ahab, in the same way that the plagues of Egypt were meant to be a demonstration of God's power and presence to the Pharaoh at the time, as well as to the Hebrews who were slaves at that time. This is supposed to bring about repentance. And Elijah seems to think it will. It appears as though Elijah is expecting that this will work, that this will actually bring about a national repentance, and the people will come back to God. And that is not what ends up happening, as we'll read about here in the next chapter. And this will send Elijah into a tailspin of depression and despair, because he seems to genuinely expect that this will cause people to turn back to the real God, and his expectations are not going to be met. And we'll see how he responds to that.